All right, hello. I'm in a new new location. Same apartment, over on the couch, gonna watch this movie with you guys. Uh I'm gonna have the sound down as much as I possibly can to avoid all the issues of YouTube putting it online and whatnot. And I'm probably not gonna put the name of the film in the link just to avoid the issues of them taking it down potentially. But it's a great film. They Live, John Carpenter, director. Carpenter directed some other movies you may have seen, probably most famously the Halloween horror franchise. Another great horror film called They Live. Sorry, not They Live, The Thing, about an alien landing in remote Antarctica and kind of infecting. Really, it's a kind of a quarantine film, infecting everyone at this base. Kurt Russell, another actor you'll see here, Keith David. This is a movie called They Live. Came out in 1988. It's a movie very much of what we would call the Reagan years, which are really still our years. We live in this period in U.S. history that, you know, in terms of its economics, which for me as a Marxist are the fundamental thing determining everything else. In terms of its economic policies, you would call neoliberal. That is, uh, you know, an attack on anything considered public goods or public, uh, you know, for the benefit of all, the commons of infrastructure, parks, public schools, public health, public workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all been privatized to increase profits. And also in this time period, the alternative to that sort of order, to this capitalist order, was dismantled with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union in the late 80s and early 90s. And, we just live in the same sort of ongoing period of uh, an attack by the 1%, or really the 0.1%, on the rest of us. The billionaire class is coming for everything. They want it all, and the logic of the system essentially forces them to want it all, even if they themselves are good, charitable, noble people. But most of them aren't, and don't believe all that hype. We've talked about this in class of I don't know, Elon Musk and Warren Buffett being your friends. And this movie is a perfect illustration of this argument. You'll see a sort of science fiction premise where the workers who are disorganized, impoverished, on the margins of society, gain an understanding of the fact that we're not all in it together, that there's a class struggle, and that the rich are our enemies. And they start to fight back. And there's two famous scenes in the film. If you're writing the final exam, this is what the final exam question is about. There's one famous scene where, again, the way the workers realize this is they put on these sunglasses, and you'll see in the film there's this famous, you put on the glasses, and when instead of seeing an ad, you see it says obey. And that's inspired the Shepard Fairey uh, street art, obey symbol that you see everywhere nowadays, or that you used to see everywhere nowadays. And or you put on the glasses, instead of saying go on a vacation, it says marry and reproduce. And when you read it, when you see a sign that says 25% off sale, it says don't think, buy, or consume, don't question authority. It's all this subliminal messaging to basically keep the status quo, which is allowing the aliens to accumulate all the wealth and basically colonize and dominate us, and we don't even know that it's happening to us. Again, it's a really perfect metaphor, perfect metaphor for the the kind of total ideology we live under, the belief system that we're consumers, and that the rich are, as they get richer, it will trickle down and benefit the rest of us. Okay, as you're seeing with the current crisis and in other ways in the coming years with climate change and everything. That is not true. And anyways, I'm gonna start the movie. I'm gonna have the sound down. But if you're with me, I'm already maybe. Here, I'll go back. I'm on the file with everyone right at the jump, and I'm gonna do a countdown: 3, 2, 1, and then I'll start the movie. 3, 2, 1, start. All right, and it's playing. You should be seeing this Canal Plus, Canal Studio logo showing up. Canal is one of the major uh, movie production studios in France. And they were a partner on this film. And then you should be seeing now Universal American Studio. MCA, fascinating company in the history of American entertainment culture. This really was mob run. Lou, if you ever want to learn about the history of movies, look up a guy named Lou Wasserman. Lou Wasserman helped create modern Hollywood and dismantle the old studio system. And then you'll see here, the beginning of the film, I'm at the point where the logo's showing up. The movie's set in LA. LA is renowned for its, working class culture, street art everywhere. This is downtown on the east side. Real dividing line in Los Angeles. When you get right to it's become gentrified. It's turned into the arts district in the 30 years since this film. Roddy Piper he's now passed away. He had a heart attack a couple of years ago. Is the main star. He was a big star when I was a kid in wrestling. You see him here now. He's this itinerant worker. He has no name in the film. Never given a name. And then when the credits roll at the end, his name is Nada, meaning nothing. And that's a reference, consciously or unconsciously, to old working class politics and the idea that, as Marx says at the end of the Communist Manifesto, workers of the world, you unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. You have a world to win, and you're really seeing people here who have nothing to lose. He's in downtown LA now, and he's seeing the massive new skyscrapers, these sort of symbols of the neoliberal order. And again, neoliberalism just refers to not liberalism in our culture, like being permissive and gays are okay and interracial marriage and that sort of thing, and freedom of speech. Not liberal in the sense of freedom, but liberal in the sense of the market, the capitalist order should not be regulated. Should not, and by regulation I mean there should be no laws. It should just be openly allowed to make its own way and decide everything for us. Okay, that's what neoliberalism refers to. And in this regard, when you have a concept like that, the work it does, the power it gives us, is that it allows us to see, for example, similarities where normally people tell you there's differences. For example, Barack Obama is as much a neoliberal as Ronald Reagan was. Conservative Democrats are essentially the mainstream ones. They're as neoliberal as Donald Trump. It's a difference of degree and not of kind. They're all basically doing nothing to contest the established order in which there's an ultra powerful, wealthy few, and the rest of us fighting over scraps. You see him now. He's in a place that a lot of Americans are heading these days, the unemployment office. Only now you can't even go in there, you have to do it online. And she has no openings, of course. And you see him, he's kind of like the prototypical, what people would call Trump voter. This white working class guy. He's been laid off, he's looking for work, he's homeless. But it's not going to end with him voting for Trump. I wouldn't show you that movie. That would be boring. And here he is, he's downtown, he's hearing the street preacher. LA's changed a lot since this area around downtown has changed a lot since this time period, but in other ways it hasn't. It's just become a more extreme version of itself. LA's Skid Row on the sort of southwest side of downtown LA, I grew up in the area, is still one of the largest concentrations of homeless people in the country. But everywhere else downtown, they've really, really made inroads with gentrification, meaning moving rich, young, corporate types and older, just moving wealthy people into the area, into downtown. They've put in subway lines. And you see an ongoing issue in the film, an ongoing theme he returns to over and over is this hypnosis of us by television, and in a way then you're so hypnotized by the television or today your phone screen that you don't even notice the rampant poverty around you, as he's very tellingly here watching a screen while he sits homeless outside, watching the screen within. And these women talking about, when I watch TV, I think I'm a star, and all this nonsense. And then, of course, the surveillance system, which is being emboldened in new and unprecedented ways under the current crisis regime. You're seeing Silicon Valley rush to make money from the crisis. In for example, the way I've been forced to teach, through the internet, through all these websites and so on. You see a kind of elliptical that is off to the side reference to the old problem of organizing and having solidarity within the working class, of how they divide us by race. They divide people by race in the working class, and then they do that to prohibit solidarity. So that, for example, whites tended to be promoted to management and foreman roles and all this sort of stuff, and then in that way kept out of the more general labor unions. And there's Keith David. I mean, you see, he's kind of like this Schwarzenegger-like Herculean figure, this sort of superhero physique and everything. And the boss has no sympathy for him. Don't sleep here, that kind of thing. And then you see he's meeting Keith David's character here, Frank. Aptly named because he's nothing if not honest. Okay, and you see right away this, after you saw that sort of reference to maybe the fact that there were non-union, undocumented workers on the site, and that's how he got the job. Right after that kind of critique that's almost a little racist, you see that the film is not really going to go there, and it's going to go here instead to this much more incredible but really necessary thing. And they symbolize it, these two, that black and white need to unite along class lines. Black and white people have a common interest in the sense that they're all, if they're not ultra wealthy, they're being exploited and harmed and immiserated, that is, impoverished by the system. Okay. And here you have what looks like basically a shanty town, a slum in the middle of one of the richest cities in the richest country on the face of the earth. You have this situation, and it's not an accident. It corresponds. This is the old Marxist idea that this is a result of all that money you saw concentrated in the skyscrapers. The skyscrapers symbolize this kind of like, we're gonna take all the money, take all the capital, and like keep it to ourselves over here in this private oasis of wealth and power. And the shanty towns, of course, run by the local church. The church is not some kind of corrupt right wing one. It's really what we'd call a church of the poor, a church of liberation of the poor. And that's why the cops eventually are going to crack down on this situation. I don't know if you guys remember in 2011, this event that started in downtown Manhattan and went around the country, Occupy Wall Street. When Occupy Wall Street was happening, they did something similar. They set up these kind of encampments, and I have a lot of criticisms of Occupy Wall Street. I don't think they were very organized. They didn't really take advantage of the opportunity. But what they started to do was basically kind of feed and give social services in these little parks and camps and so on to people who needed it. And the writer and critic, historian Mike Davis, who's most famously a historian of Los Angeles, books like here, I just have one here because he writes about black poetry in this book, City of Courts. And he wrote another book. I've been reading him a lot because when things are going bad, he's the person I turn to. And this is his book about pandemics. Mike Davis, City of Courts is a book about LA, Ecology of Fear, and then he has a new one called We Own the Night, LA in the 60s. When Occupy Wall Street began, he wrote an essay where he drew attention to how in this movie, John Carpenter had basically sort of predicted that things like Occupy Wall Street would, out of necessity, have to spring up. That there would have to be these ways of providing. I mean, this is how social services, how a welfare state functions when the government doesn't care anymore and doesn't want to tell people. And then you see them here, Frank being black, being laid off recently and so on. He's had it. He looks over there and he says, "That's not my country. That's not something that's going on here." And Nada, so far, he still believes. He's like, "I believe in a honest day's work, an honest day's pay, all that stuff." But that's going to change, and he's going to learn really. And this is why I'm teaching this film. He's going to learn how to think for himself. I mean, he already has, but he's really going to take it to this level where he becomes conscious of himself and the social class, the economic, political class he belongs to, and he becomes aware that his class, working class people, Marx called it the proletariat, these people are being manipulated, impoverished, and generally just left behind and exploited. And all the fruits of their labor, all the work they do is the value in it is stolen from them, is taken from them. And you see here already that the resistance people, the people sort of allied with the church, this underground network, they're trying to break into the main signal. They're trying to go through the culture, go through the television set, and break in to people's. And he starts to get he sees that old preacher again, and he starts to get some inclination that maybe there's some connection between the church that's running this camp and the signal, this message that like you're being manipulated by supernatural forces. He starts to see that maybe there's a connection between this church and this resistance group. And that guy, I forget the actor's name, but he'll come to play a larger role in the film later. And you see the connection here. It's a nice one. It's an old cliche, but I believe in it. The truth hurts. The truth hurts. And so when the signal breaks through later, when he puts the glasses on, you get this headache at first. And now you see, again, he's kind of running his own surveillance here on them. He's he's really, he's suspicious. He's like, what's going on? He's not on their side. He's really on no one's side at this point. And in that way, he resembles, the kind of the loner drifter figure is a big part of, you know, Hollywood heroism, protagonists you're used to, uh, trying to do the right thing, but he doesn't want to be bound to anyone. I mean, a classic '80s figure, '80s action figure who has this, who embodies that is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger famously in a lot of his movies, not the Terminator, but in for example, The Running Man. Have you ever seen The Running Man? Schwarzenegger is similarly there. He's loath to get involved with politics. He's just trying to look out for himself and his friends and kind of be a person. Another figure like that, if you've ever, I mean, this is the classic way heroes work in westerns. If you've ever seen, like, the old spaghetti westerns that Clint Eastwood was in and so on, where you don't want to get too involved, but then circumstances force you to take on this role of a hero, and it makes the person more sympathetic. And it really goes back to melodrama and opera. There was always this tendency to present the hero as a kind of outsider who then, according to circumstances, not his fixed beliefs or his dogma or his pre-existing politics and ideology, because it's hard to relate to someone like that unless you already share their ideology. A more universal figure is one who's skeptical and a bit of an outsider, as we are when we watch the film. Okay, and again, he's continuing with his surveillance, and you see perfectly that the church is the African Methodist Church. Again, the black church, huge part in freedom struggles in our country. Martin Luther King was a preacher. There is this there are multiple traditions, and one of them is fairly conservative in the black church to do the sort of prosperity gospel and the power of positive thinking. But there's also a strain of theology and thinking about God that says God is love, and we have to protect the less fortunate and fight for their rights, and that's what the church should be for. And that's why people, when Trump's ICE agents come looking for them and they're undocumented, they flee into churches, and the ministers there try to look after them and give them sanctuary. And now you see he's seen, okay, they're just piping in this music. There's not actually a church service going on. This is a front. And what the hell are they doing? They're not making drugs. They're making sunglasses. That's odd. And we see the famous words again. They live. And who are they? They are, as you'll find out, or if you've already seen the movie, they are the rich and the powerful. And now we see the meeting. He's kind of overhearing this, right, from the next room. He's spying for himself. He's thinking for himself. He's like, what's going on? I'm going to look into this. He has this curiosity. He's an honest person. And then he's kind of in the midst of all this, playing out. It's very tight. Carpenter, the books, it's based on a short story, which I have never read, unfortunately. I really should. And Carpenter's really tightly organized the film so that even when he stumbles over something like this, and this becomes a payoff later. And then the preacher, of course, we've now seen several different times. He discovers that Nada's in the room, and then he makes a wonderful, uh, inference here. He touches his hands. Oh, work with your hands. Okay, I can trust you. You're a working person. you know, you know what the rich are about, and that they're not our friends. And of course, the surveillance is back. If nothing else, this film should teach you to see the amount of helicopters the police have as something of an issue. And they don't fly them over all the neighborhoods in New York City. I love his hair in this movie. That classic, classic mullet. The shorty long back. And off it goes back to where it belongs, on the top of some skyscraper where most people will never be permitted. And you can see Frank and Nada kind of switching roles here. And, you know, Frank is maybe so cynical that nothing seems to matter to him much with going to, with, being, excuse me, with being, I know, don't yawn in class, with being, you don't have to, say much, and you don't have to. There's nothing you can do. The rich are just gonna take it, and Nada's like, no, I'm interested in what's going on here. Regardless of whether someone's doing something else right or wrong, or the rich or powerful, I'm still gonna look into this. And where are they taking all this stuff? And he doesn't quite get that they're on his side. They're making this argument here that this is an argument that will continue and escalate. Where he's saying, I'm walking a fine line here, and I'm walking a straight line, and then Nada responds, the line's in the middle of the road. That's the most dangerous place to drive, and that, pretty soon it's going to become an issue of which side are you on, and they're both on the same side. Objectively, they're both in the sort of impoverished working class, barely hanging on, trying to, as most of us do, just hoe your row, go along to get along, mind your own business, keep your job, keep your head down, all those expressions you've heard people tell you when you see some sort of problem at work and life and so on. But there's also circumstances, as the film is going to document, where it's just no longer possible to do that, and you have to act. And you have to get people on your side, and you have to pick a side, and that's really where this is heading. And there's a great parallel between this scene. Hopefully, you have the sound up here, because you really hear the soundtrack, the score, the music, and the ambient sound of the film, the sound design of they really start to coincide in this nice counterpoint where like the movie's becoming like a war scene, and it's very chaotic in the sound design, and then that cool underlying sort of ominous music really starts to mean what it was supposed to mean all along, that there's a problem. And it's worth noting that John Carpenter, and it's pretty rare for film directors and most musicians who write film scores are glad. He writes his own music. He writes his own music for these films. Famously, he wrote, if you've ever seen Halloween has this great great like signature melody, what we call a leitmotif, a leading motive, a leading idea in music. Short little fragments that, you know, there's one here, da 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 da, that kind of bluesy harmonic solo, and then that underlying pulse of like dum 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 dum. Also a big part of a lot of suspenseful horror film music. I remember being really scared by this movie when I saw it as a kid. I think at the time I didn't grasp the politics of it. You know, I think I was 10 when it came out, and I think we rented it on VHS. I'll get nostalgic thinking about going to the VHS rental store with my family as a kid. It's such a great institution that's gone now. And you see the parallel here. I mean, this is what they did to Occupy Wall Street. Bloomberg sent in the cops, and they just wiped it out. They wiped it out, and they did that all over the country. And then there was really nothing left except a sort of vocabulary about the rich and the poor, that we're the 99% and they're the 1%, which isn't quite accurate, and but it does have a general truth in that the workers, although they lack power and organization, they in principle have vastly outnumber the wealthy and powerful, and that should count for something. And now you see, you know, Frank and Nada, they're beginning to unite after bickering in different times, you know, where Frank has that great line, it's the golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules. If you don't know, that's a deeply sarcastic version of the famous idea of the golden rule in all major religions, you know, that you treat others how you want to be treated. That's the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But here we have the golden rule of the neoliberal order. He who has the gold makes the rules. And you see that right here. These people without any gold, without any power, they're not entitled to even spend the night where they are used to spending the night, because they don't pay rent there, they don't own the land, you know, and then it becomes suspicious though here, and I think it's really dawning on him, like, wait a second, like, why are they singling out, you know, this old preacher, this old kind of professor figure? What kind of threat are these guys that the cops have to, you know, they chase everyone away and throw and trash the church and everything, but why are they essentially beating these guys to death? What do these guys know? You know, you see him this whole time. He's in this contemplative, critical thinking mode, but increasingly he's being forced to take action. And you see it here. You see his heroism. You see his ability to think on his feet. And you see a cliche of all Hollywood that's really, you know, works in this case. Most of the time I'm sick of it. I don't ever want to see another superhero movie. But he's the hero overcoming against all odds. You know, he's like homeless now. Cops have rolled in and rousted his homeless encampment. They've separated from his friend. They've killed all these. They've beaten to death these, you know, essentially somewhat suspicious, but they definitely don't seem to deserve that punishment based on what he knows now. And the force they brought down, it's overwhelming. It's like, what can one man, no matter how muscular and you know, valiant and brave and courageous he is, what can he do? Nothing. He's just hiding, you know, a few of his friends and comrades. You see the figure there for one way of coping with the overwhelming power of the rich and the powerful is drugs. You know, this guy's self-medicating, living in an abandoned apartment, squatting, as we say. And there was a time, sorry, excuse me for the sleepiness. There was a time in New York where, you know, so much of it was abandoned, and throughout the 1970s and the 80s, that squatters' rights were a thing. You could come in and live. And the same in LA. And who knows, maybe we'll go back there. I mean, so many people are going to leave the city and never come back at this point. So many storefronts that are closing are never going to return, at least not under the current government policies that are being implemented. And this is all over the world today, you guys. This is how people live. They live informally. That is, their jobs are not paycheck to paycheck, regularity. They're, you know, basically working informally, selling stuff on the street, I don't know, panhandling, petty crime, subsistence criminality, uh, and then they live informally too. They live in another book, very sad but profound book by Mike Davis called Planet of Slums. They live informally. They live in favelas, shanty towns, etc. In all the major cities of the world, outside of the developed world, but increasingly in the developed world, people live in places where they're not supposed to be living, and there's a huge amount of them that do this, like billions of people. And this is what they're subject to. If the cops don't want them there, if someone wants to build a skyscraper, they just roust people from their informal settlements in the slums of Mumbai or Mexico City or, Lagos, Nigeria, or Dhaka, Bangladesh, you name it. All these major cities all over the global south. People live in these sort of shanty town-like conditions, and huge amounts of them. Millions and millions. Now we're getting to the great scene here. He's found this last little bit of sunglasses that he just accidentally happened to save. And he's disappointed. And you see what these glasses are. They're essentially glasses where if you put them on, you see the truth. This would be a very convenient thing to have as a teacher. Instead, you got to be like, hey man, you got to read this book. And there's like, oh, that's going to take some time. Isn't there a quicker way? No, there's not. But this movie imagines a way in which there might be. And what is the truth? The truth is that the rich and the powerful are different from you and me, as F. Scott Fitzgerald said, and that their rich and powerfulness depends, by and large, depends overwhelmingly on the fact that the rest of us are poor. And as we grow poorer, they grow richer. And you see this profound, old school communist idea dawn on Nada here when he puts on these glasses. Very famous. You see all these scenes where put on the glasses, he puts on the glasses, and this is the great scene. This is the most famous scene in the film. And it says obey, that famous, street art slogan. And then takes them off, and it's something about high technology. Puts the glasses back on, obey. And it's like, wait a second. Okay, maybe that was just a fluke. Let me look at this other one about going on vacation. And then you're seeing him. Okay, what's this say? No independent thought. And again, if I had another name to say for what this theme I've been trying to bring up in class, I was thinking for yourself. That's it. Have independent thought. Be independent of others. But also know when it's time to unite with them. Okay, you don't have to always be independent because that's lonely, and that's, humans are fundamentally social and cooperative. So what's the good of all that? And then this profound sort of astonishing realization of how pervasive the mind control is. It's not just on the billboards, it's on every piece of paper in every magazine on the shelf. Or to put it in modern terms, it's on every website and every social media app. In everything you look at online, there's this underlying message. If we were to remake this film, not that this movie needs to be remade, but I'm pretty sure someone will eventually. And then, and again, you see it's just ratcheting up. Oh man, the fuck. And it's clearly differentiated along class lines. Look at this guy, nice suit, nice tie. He's rich. You know, perfectly coiffed hair. If you touch his hands, they're smooth. And guess what? He's not human. He's one of our alien overlords. And he has every marker and indication is that he's of the elite. He's of the bourgeoisie, as Marx and Engels would have called them, the 1%, as Bernie would call them, the rich and the powerful. And he's suspicious of Nada, and Nada is in disbelief suddenly. He's astonished. But see, with the glasses on, that guy's a human. And because why? Because he's just a normal working class dude, and that's maybe the best of them. The money says, this is your God. I love that one. That's my favorite. And it really is, you guys. People worship money. Rich and poor alike. It's our God. And you don't even have to be a leftist, communist, Marxist like me to think that. I mean, Sigmund Freud, who was basically, in most ways, conservative, he wrote a lot of comments about the fact that money had replaced the old gods. And now you hear the subliminal messages. And again, you see the woman getting the pedicure is the alien. But there are some, as you'll learn in the movie, human collaborators, you know, humans who have sort of learned the truth and decided, like, well, what are you going to do? I'll just go along with this. But here, all this fashionable language about going to the right kind of classes, you know, eating the right kind of food, all the stuff with the style section of the New York Times, it's all for the rich aliens, you know. And then he goes into, like, your local bodega that's been, you know, transformed. And you'll see a great reference here to, again, you see all the aliens are rich. They shop at the fashionable kind of, you know, organic bodega that's opened up in your neighborhood where everything's overpriced, and the people you're not used to seeing who are white are there. And then you'll see in a hilarious way here, you know, the human can't get the promotion. And then you'll see this great reference to Ronald Reagan, Morning in America, and this figure on the TV in the background here is essentially that's supposed to be Ronald Reagan, the president of the United States at the time. And all this call for optimism, it should strike you as going back to Candide. And, you know, it's not that we shouldn't ever be optimistic, but we should doubt people who are overly optimistic. And you should ask yourself, what are they selling? How do they benefit from telling you, don't complain, don't believe your lying eyes, believe my words? You know, that was essentially what Pangloss is so famously ridiculous for arguing over and over. Like, oh, it's fine. My nose is rotting off. It's for the best. Oh, we're about to be executed by being burned alive after an earthquake to appease the gods. Oh, it's fine. You know, we were meant to be here. There's nothing you can do. Oh, someone's about to drown. Don't save them. It's all part of the plan. And then you see him. He's admitted that he knows, and they are not pleased. And you see the movie kind of takes on this horror. And you see here this underlying truth that the rich are organized in a way the poor are not. Look at that. Right away, they're all just like, as the meme says, they're all Karen on their phone, you know. calling the cops on some black kids who are skateboarding, or somebody who's not supposed to be barbecuing in that on that particular day in that particular park or something. But don't worry, we have like a Schwarzenegger like hero here, who, in addition to having witty comments for every occasion here. Lipstick on a pig. I know this movie so well. I should show something else, I think. And of course, the police not being rich, but they are, in a leftist viewpoint, that whether you know it or not, or like it or not, if you work in law enforcement, you're essentially working on behalf of capitalism and the wealthy and powerful. Because they own the government and they make the laws, and your job is merely to enforce them. And there's a lot of well-intentioned people in the police department, but most of them, if they stick by it, being well-intentioned, a lot of bad things happen to them. A great movie documenting that is a classic movie from the 70s called Serpico, about the real life police detective Frank Serpico, played by Al Pacino. And the cops who risk their lives and their livelihoods exposing the racism of the stop and frisk policies of Bloomberg are similarly kind of, they're exceptions to the rule, that they think for themselves and they question their superiors and the wisdom of racist policing, and then guess what ends up happening to them? They're intimidated at work, forced out of their jobs, etc., just like Serpico was back in the 70s. And then this famous line here, I'm here to, great line he's going to say, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. Classic one-liner, Schwarzenegger's famous for them, John Wayne back in the day. Because of hero in Hollywood, they got to whoop ass, and they got to do it in a way that's entertaining too. And of course it meets all these cliches of Hollywood. It's a genre movie, it's an action film, it's a sci-fi film. So of course the bad guys can't miss, or the bad guys can't shoot straight and the good guy can't miss. I mean, how else does one guy overcome against all odds, and that logic has extended into a different cultural franchise we all know and love, or so many of us play, that's overwhelmed movies. Video games are the same way, You shoot one guy, they're gone, they got to shoot you like 20 times, and you got 3 more lives. And he sees there, it's dawning on him, oh man, their technology is vastly superior, right? The guy could just teleport, transport. You're dealing with an alien civilization that far exceeds ours in terms of its technological accomplishments and capabilities. But you can still shoot them with bullets, so that's good. Very 80s. Though it looks a little like Zoom there with the screens. And then he sees, again, almost like in a video game, right? Where you're penalized if you shoot the wrong person, right? If you shoot one of the free people, not the enemy, you get, you lose points, or you lose part of your health or whatever. He knows not to shoot that cop because that cop's not one of the aliens. And here you're meeting the love interest played by Meg Foster, Holly, in the movie. And Holly works for the television station, which, again, what does that symbolize, thematize in the film more largely? That for a revolution like this, that Nada's going to sort of unwittingly become involved in and then become sort of the leader of, by default, revolution like this needs help from people within the system in high places. You need people like Holly who work for the cable channels, the cultural channels. And you've seen really the power of the media to make or break movements. If you followed all the presidential primary that's now essentially over. You know, Bernie really rose and fell over ultimately in large degree. You saw the power of the media in that and shaping the narrative and making it seem like Biden was the choice of the majority. And I'm not saying he wasn't, and I'm not saying Bernie didn't have some flaws in the campaign, but definitely, you know, the ability of the media to constantly criticize him overwhelmingly. MSNBC was more hostile. The liberal media was more hostile than Fox was half the time. And maybe that's because Bernie didn't, you know, have his. Maybe Fox did want Bernie. Ultimately, they thought he'd be weaker against Trump, but I don't think that would have been the case. And you see him, you know, he's already become this sort of misunderstood outsider hero more than, you know, he's gone from having nothing to lose to having lost having lost the nothing. He had nothing to lose, and now he's lost. He's on the run from the cops, but as luck would have it, he's met a nice girl with a BMW who lives in the Hollywood Hills, which is one of the most you know, the canyons in the northern part of historic LA are some of the most wealthy enclaves, wealthy neighborhoods in all of Southern California. This is where all the celebrities and rock stars and movie stars live. So, aside from, you know, everywhere else they live, Santa Monica and Malibu and you name it. But she lives in this fashionable part of town, and you can tell that she's made a lot of money in movies or made a lot of money in television from how modern her house is. And she sees him as, you know, she doesn't yet recognize that he's on the right side of things and that you know, he's fighting for what's right. She sees him as a kidnapper and she's the hostage. And you see that the divide here is that, and it's also a class one, you know? I mean, his work shirt, his blue jeans, his long hair, his rough hands, he's a working class guy. When would he be at a house like this normally? I don't, just to do some construction or to fix her plumbing or, you know. This is not the kind of neighborhood he lives in, not the kind of house he lives in. And of course she won't believe him, not only because he's her kidnapper, but because, you know, if she were to believe him, even if she's given evidence, everything she has, her whole life in this comfort and luxury, is dependent on the fact that the aliens control everything, you know? So even if she were to learn this, it's a good chance she wouldn't necessarily go over to his side, right? She's on the other side of the class struggle. She's benefiting this from a system. She's one of the few humans benefiting from a system that is impoverishing and imprisoning working class people like him, who are the vast majority and who are overwhelmingly the victims of the system and not the beneficiaries. And again, this motive returns over and over again, this idea that you put the glasses on, you see the truth, and the truth hurts, and you can't keep the glasses on. So he's basically trying to recover intellectually mentally, physically, from how much of the bitter truth of the class struggle comes through to you when you see the truth through the glasses. And then she tells him here, yeah, man, I work at the cable station. And his first thought is, because now he's been politicized, he's like, we got to spread the message. We got to enlighten people. We got to give them class consciousness and tell them about the fact that we've been colonized and we don't even know it. And there'll be this great reversal of events here. Because the movie's, it's got a little dull, no? They're having a talk. It's like, give me a break. And then she kind of takes her one advantage and throws him out of the window. Brilliant move on her part, but not a fortunate turn of events for our hero. Thought he had a new friend, thought he had an ally, but he should have known better. She's too rich to hear what he has to say, And you'll see now, this is, so basically I'm asking the final, like that first scene, that's a very important scene when one worker gets the message about the class struggle and realizes he has to seize his destiny and begin to fight for what's right and fight on behalf of the oppressed and fight back against the rich and there's foot soldiers, the police in this case, whatever. And the next part of the journey, and that's what I'm asking you, which is more important, one worker finding consciousness or him trying to spread the message? And you see it fails there. It's almost doomed to, because she's not in his same economic circumstance. It's like, even if she believed him, how does she benefit materially from telling him, from going along with it and be like, okay, yeah, I'll fight with you? It's like she's gonna lose everything she has. And she has a lot to lose. She's not an ordinary worker like him who has nothing to lose. And who's just gonna hide out, and things are getting worse and worse for him. Poor guy. Maybe at his lowest point here, totally alone, wanted for multiple homicides, and jilted by a beautiful woman. Doesn't get much worse than that. And here we are back again on the east side of LA. He's stumbled and bumbled his way all the way across town from the Hollywood Hills to back to where he had a job helping gentrify downtown LA, and he's looking for Frank, of course, and he's going to try to spread the word, spread the message, create class consciousness, because it matters little if it's just you. You really got to reach out to others and create solidarity and create a movement. And of course, Frank is like, what are you even talking about, man? Like, you killed all those people. What the fuck is wrong with you? Keith David's still alive. He does a lot of voice acting these days. You'll hear him if you watch documentaries, he's often the kind of voice of authority. He's taken on that role that, of the kind of authoritative black speaker that was held in the previous generation by James Earl Jones, who was the voice actor for Darth Vader in Star Wars. And then the example is that singer and actor and political activist and lawyer and athlete that we talked about in the beginning of the Black Poets book, Paul Robeson, So he's become kind of like the fourth generation of Robeson. Not nearly as accomplished, you know, but it seems to be a part that's needed in our society. And then, oh no, of course, the glasses are gone. And now you're going to see, you guys, maybe the greatest one-on-one, man-to-man, single, hand-to-hand, single combat action sequence fight scene in any movie ever made. You're gonna see them fight it out. It's almost 6 minutes long. It took like multiple days to film. You see, they really rely on Roddy Piper's career and expertise in simulating fighting as a wrestler. I remember as a kid being so disappointed and unbelieving when my dad told me that you know, that wrestling wasn't real. I was just shocked. I was like, what? And I never had any interest in it really after that. But he got his glasses, and now you'll see his friend trying to help him, give him a little money, and then leave me out of it. And then this profound problem that you have as an educator in any circumstance, but especially now, where do people want to know the truth? Yes and no, but overwhelmingly in a way that's dispiriting. But if you're going to have a job like mine, you just got to accept it and fight through it. No, often they don't. Ignorance is bliss. Leave me out of it. I'll go along to get along. I'll mind my business. And when you try to tell someone the truth, they resist. You know, this is why I think students just want a grade, and they don't want to hear your comments on their writing or anything. They just want a grade. Because that grade is not the truth, honestly. The grade is a gross oversimplification of the amount of effort and the process and all the time you've put into learning. All it really says is, you know, what social class does this person belong to? Because then if you're rich, your family's probably more educated, they can pay for tutors, they can help you themselves, they can basically do all your work for you to basically bolster your grade. Whereas people without those resources, you know, they're spending for themselves and getting shitty grades. So grades are not truthful. And you see here in this brilliant sequence, you see in a kind of dramatic, exaggerated way, but it's so fun to watch. This fight that goes on forever. The fight to tell someone the truth, and the resistance that they'll put up. The physical resistance, the defiance, the violence that you'll be met with if you try to tell people the truth. And that's what this fight is about, this brilliant, brilliant fight. And you got to think, basically every time there's a cut, new shot, there's all this preparation. This took days to film this 6-minute scene. They gotta do the makeup. You know, they gotta give them little breaks because they're actually exhausting themselves doing all this. New cut. Start the scene over. Love how they both wear old Timbs. Keeping it real, meaning show your roots in the working class. He thinks it's over, but no, I mean, he's dedicated. You know, there's like a correlation here between the violence he wants to inflict on his friend and the love he has for him. I'm not going to let you get away. I'm going to show you what I know because I love you and I'm willing to fight you. Oh, great move. Love that move. Classic wrestling move. Biting the hands. I mean, it's just getting out of control, this part of the movie. But this is the question I'm asking you on the, you know, and it's really a matter of opinion. I would tend to side with this part of the movie as the more important because of my job as an educator and so on. That you know, you learning is when what's more important in terms of the development of the film, and really overall, if you think that we need to fight back against the ultra elite and have a real democracy, you know, have control of our own destiny as people. Which is more important, the realization Nada has when he puts on the glasses the first time, or here when he's fighting, and you see the humor that they're able to get. I mean, there's so many twists and turns in this scene. It's amazing. And you see they doing all this makeup, so his head's bleeding in the back, and their clothes are getting destroyed. Oh, one last one for... And now it looks as though it's over. And it seems as though Nada has lost. And Frank tells him to fuck off. So great. Not subtle acting, but it's so genuine. You can really tell they love these roles, you know? Who wouldn't love a role like this? Oh, but then he stayed, and Nada got back up, and they're going blow for blow, but he's getting him in one of those moves, classic move. It's a wrestling match, you know. It's like a great wrestling match if you've ever watched, you know, Monday Night Raw or whatever. Finally gets him on there, and he makes him see the truth, which is that we are not free. We are slaves who mistake our unfreedom for freedom, and we can't see it. But in this movie, they've imagined a simple way that we can, which is through these glasses. And who are our masters if we're the slaves? It's simple. Wall Street, the power elite, the upper echelons of government, of finance, capitalism, the military, academia, not CUNY, of course, although there are a few very elite profs at CUNY. Paul Krugman, the liberal, you know, neoliberal economist at the grad center, but like I'm talking Harvard, you know, people who set policy. Your average English professor is not setting policy. I'm just a teacher who writes a couple books. They check into a Skid Row hotel, you know, one of these SROs, single occupant residencies. Sorry, single resident occupancies. Single occupant residencies, sorry, SOR. I don't know, I've never lived in one. The great makeup here, the workers almost beat each other to death just trying to get organized. It's such a great metaphor for the history of working class politics and working class movements, where it's like, how are we gonna unite? There's so many of us, all these little egos. All these petty concerns. And we're entering the final act of the movie here. That was you saw these two kind of explosive events at the beginning of each act. Most conventional genre movies are in 3 acts. It's supposed to be 90 minutes. First act. By the end, the first act ended basically when they were roused out of the camp. Second act begins when he gets the glasses, puts them on. Second act ends when he convinces Frank to put on the glasses. And now it's third act where, what are we going to do now? And the answer is they got to find the resistance. They got to find what's left of that movement that was seemingly destroyed when they went in. When the cops came into the church and the cops came into the encampment, the shanty town they were living in, and rousted everyone and seemed to beat up and destroy the movement. But if you remember the one guy who got away with the glasses in the car, maybe he's still alive. He wasn't killed in the ensuing onslaught by the cops. And you hear them here discussing almost, how friends do over drinks at the bar, and how the rich do with their psychoanalysts, discussing childhood, and how we're sort of determined by our parents and our early life and our economic situation then, and to what a great extent that's our fate. And for good or bad, but for so many people not for the best, because you don't pick that fate. Most people don't have much money growing up. Most people don't have families who have a lot of education. And that's really what having a robust social democracy, having the kind of benefit programs and economic rights that Bernie's talking about, it's meant to, alleviate that bad luck of people being born into poverty and being born into circumstances where there's not much possibility for happiness and freedom and achievement and developing your talents and your skills and so on, that you would be able to develop under social democracy, under as Karl Marx said, in under communism, that'd be to each according to his from each according to his abilities, and to each according to his needs. So we give you what you need. And it's amazing how few of us have that. We don't have what we need. You can have what you want. There's plenty of video games and movies and so on. You can live in a fantasy. But can you go to the doctor? Only if you have health insurance. And you've seen the problem with that now, with millions of people thrown out of work and losing their health insurance. And here, so from each according to his needs, and then to each according to his needs, and from each according to his abilities. Are you good at something? Do you have ability? Do you have talent? Are you a musician? Are you a writer? Are you a worker? Are you a scientist? Are you a nurse? Well, then we need that. We need your abilities. And what would a society be like that? I think that's where we need to go if we're going to survive. And this movie's pointing that direction, fighting back. And that's the society that would be on the other side of this fight that they're engaging in. So they've met up. They've rejoined the resistance through luck, by sort of returning to where the poor are in the Skid Row area. They've run into that guy from the encampment again, and now they're being asked to come to a meeting. And you're going to see this final sequence where, Grissom doesn't have a lot of time. He's got 20 minutes left. And the movie comes to resemble, really, in a good way, in a way I think, it comes to resemble a video game where they got to fight their way out of the situation and kill the main boss and do that, do like a video game mission where you got to shoot out the tower and stop the signal at the top of the tower. It's great that they wear the glasses. It's such a style thing, We tend to think of people wearing sunglasses indoors is like they can't be bothered and they're cool, and that's true to some extent. And it annoys me when I'm teaching in class, but I appreciate it too. and you see that the resistance is evolving, and you see this is sort of the, Marx imagined that the class struggle was sort of like Darwin's law of natural selection, is this law of political economic history by which things change and transform over time. So the workers they've invented one tool, but now to be less surveilled, right, they have to adapt. If they're going to survive, they need a form of the glasses that will be less apparent to the enemy that they're fighting. So that's evolving. The technology they're using is evolving. And he gives here this great commentary that really speaks. He almost gives away too completely what the commentary. He says, they're like, why are they here? He's like, they just want our resources. It's business to them. They want our resources. We are their third world. We are just the people they colonize. And it says a lot there about how people in America see other countries. And they give you one example, like of a place you probably heard about, or you can name a bunch of them: Cuba, Venezuela in previous generations, Vietnam, where we sent soldiers and we colonize, or we to this day, we don't actively colonize Vietnam, or don't actively colonize Venezuela and Cuba, but through economic power, we dominate and control and keep them in poverty. These countries that dare to do something outside of the U.S. imperial system, led by Washington and Wall Street finance power. If you dare to do something outside, if you dare to sort of determine your own economic future as a country, you're punished. And that's what he's describing here. Imagine if that was the happening to us from an alien society, and we were their third world. Well, we are. We're approaching third world conditions in the United States. I mean, what's unemployment right now? It's probably 25%, 30%. It was always undercounted to begin with. It's always been bad in the inner cities if you're a person of color. But it's starting to be that way for everyone in the whole country under the current crisis system. And you're going to see another wave if they don't bail out states and provide all this emergency funding to states. People with my job and stuff, we're going to start getting laid off in mass, because states can't run deficits. And New York should be shut down. New York, so much of its revenue comes from people going into the city and conducting business and going to restaurants and all this sort of stuff, and then people using the roads for tolls. People, especially big problem now, tourism. Who the fuck is going to come to New York and go on a holiday and tourism in the current circumstance? Nobody. And here you see Holly has apparently joined the resistance. And this fool is sprung. He's caught some feelings. She pushed him out a damn window, and he's like, it's cool. Those pretty blue eyes on the ginger. Look at that face. What a fool. Just an honest working man. No match for an educated vixen like this. No match for her, man. He never had a chance. But he should have known better than to look above his station and try to spark a relationship across the class divide. And then, of course, and now the video game starts. That was all the kind of, I forget what it's called in the video game where they, like in Grand Theft Auto, where the scene plays out where you meet some new figure and they explain what you have to do. And now the game starts, the game begins, and you got to kind of shoot your way out of here. And the cops, of course, are coming in with overwhelming force. It's a war. I mean, it's a class struggle, and now it's a war. They're not arresting anybody here. They're just shooting to kill. And it's being run, again, like the way the U.S. historically has backed, right-wing dictatorships throughout the Latin America. They would come in with they would train military there to be essentially death squads and go and shoot unarmed civilians and women and children and murder and disappear people. And it sounds exaggerated what I'm saying, but it's really not. Look at what's called like the School of the Americas, where all these death squads were trained in the United States. And you're seeing that just sort of playing out here and now. And the suppression of the left under violent suppression of the left here by the ruling class and their military wing. But fortunately, this is a video game, and the heroes are the good working class guys. And as you know, in video games and from watching action movies like this, the bad guys can't shoot straight, and the good guys don't miss. And our good guys, even here, when all the odds are against them and under normal circumstances would die, they find a way out through the technology they've been given. And again, that's this old idea that Marx was saying, that like capitalism was creating these conditions that are horrible for workers, but it's also creating the resources and the tools that the workers need to overcome the conditions. And if it's freed, if the industrial productive mode is freed from the profit motive, freed from the interest and the benefits having to go to the profits of a very few, then it'll be better. And you see that, that's really what Bernie is talking about with healthcare. This private system we have, it makes no sense right now. It never made any sense in the first place, except that it made money for health insurance companies. And now you see all these countries that are better able to respond to the system, to the pandemic than we are. It's because they have a real public health system that we lack. And so they're able to, through that technology of the powerful, disappear into the headquarters. And you see again this sort of exposition walkthrough of just how powerful the forces of capitalism are, and how overwhelming and depressing it is really to see it as workers, as ordinary people here. And then you also see in a really refined way the idea that there's humans collaborating, and they're getting reports, right, that the quote-unquote terrorist network is being put down. And you see what's essentially like a shareholders meeting, right? People who own stock in the company are not the workers. They're usually just rich people, or there's some institutional investors. Like if you have a pension, like I do, money's in that system, whether you like it or not. You don't control it. But these are like these major shareholders, essentially, in the alien colonial enterprise. And they're the rich aliens, but they're also, as he calls them here, the human power elite. And that's an old expression. C. Wright Mills, great book in the 60s called The Power Elite, where he describes, who's running the show. Not in a conspiratorial way, just in a matter-of-fact way. It's corporate managerial elites, Fortune 500, publicly traded and privately held companies like Koch Industries or, GE, big banks, Goldman Sachs, the corporate managerial executive elite, Berkshire Hathaway, etc. And then major universities, the academic administrative elite, you know, major professors, major college presidents, and that kind of thing, setting policy, framing ideas and discussions about what's possible in society. And then, of course, the government that carries it all out, that basically is bought and sold and paid for by the corporate elite and listens to the managerial class of the corporate and the academic elite. And this guy, you know, he's a collaborator, and he mistakes them for people who are you know, joining, because you can't beat them, you join them. And he's gonna kind of show them. They're playing it cool, right? This is again sort of like the walkthrough scene in the video game. So they made it through that one level, right, where they got to here, and they've seen this sort of video game logic, where now they're in a walkthrough where things are being explained, and then you're gonna start like playing the final mission here in a second, where they have to kind of shoot their way out again and find the tower and disrupt the signal. But here you're seeing just the overwhelming power of the elites. And we're reaching this point, you know, you think about someone like Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, the CEO of, the chief executive officer of Amazon, or Elon Musk, who's not quite as rich, but a little bit more of a public figure, given his sort of ridiculous pronouncements in the press and on Twitter. These guys are just training. Their big pet project is to build their own private, you know, ability to travel in space and go to Mars and colonize and just float out into the universe and the galaxy and look down on the rest of us like the ants that we are, the insects, the bugs that they think of us as, you know, from up on high in their you know, spaceships that they're going to build, or that they're already building in the case of Elon Musk with SpaceX. And here you are, and you know, and I don't know if he's right or wrong, but the thesis, the suggestion here seems to be from Carpenter, from the director of the film, that like the way you know, you have to disrupt a signal. You have to kind of, first of all, you can only build a network, build a movement by, first of all, breaking into the system and showing it for what it is, showing that the rich are not like the rest of us, and that the things you're being told on a daily basis by the media and the power elite and controlling the media are. And that's another element of the power elite, the mainstream media, the corporate media, which you'll hear the right wing, the people who profoundly I disagree with and who would want me in prison or something. They talk about the lamestream media and all that stuff, but they're part of it. They're just lying. And now the game's begun again. You got to shoot those first, and they're on the way to, you know, the video game. You're in the final mission here. And he's just like, I mean, he speaks almost for, you can almost sympathize with him. He's like, what are you talking about? You can't, and that really was his thesis here is really what became common sense, whether you knew it or not, whether you consciously believed it or not, in the last 30 years of our society, that history is over and that there's no alternative. What are you guys talking about? That we just live under capitalism now. Of course they're going to privatize the schools. Of course they're going to go to war over oil in the Middle East. There's no alternative. What you think there's going to be socialism? It didn't work in the Soviet Union. Blah blah blah. Like there's no alternative. And that's continuing today. You're seeing the big mega corporations, Facebook, Google, all the military contractors, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, the media elites, Comcast and Viacom, all these big companies, Disney, they're all seeking every way they can to capitalize on the situation now, and they're only going to grow stronger. And I'm not saying that there is an alternative that we can just choose, like this movie shows, but at a certain point it becomes necessary. Politics is often described as the art of the possible and the art of compromise. But also, as you'll see, with people not paying rent now and workers more and more going on strike, although it's not, it's mostly failing, it becomes necessary to change things eventually. And that's really when a movement led by workers is maybe something that can happen when it's not that it's possible suddenly, it's that it's necessary. As this seems to be necessary for Frank and Nada, and they're willing to give it all up and sacrifice anything, including their lives. And how do you get to the roof? Again, they're in the video game logic where you don't kill, the civilians, you kill the bad guys, the sort of paramilitary police now. It's not even the cops anymore. It's like this weird private army of the aliens. Mercenary army. Which do exist. If you've heard about the wars that we fight in the Middle East, in Iraq and Afghanistan, by and large now the number of private contractors is equivalent, if not greater, than the number of regulation ordinary U.S. service personnel in those war zones. The wars themselves that are being waged by ostensibly the U.S. government are being fought overwhelmingly by private contractors. And again, you see the video game logic of the film here. They've sort of cornered them. This would make a great video game. You need a lot more scenes. There's really only the couple scenes that are video game like, right? There's the first one where he gets the glasses and shoots up people at the bank, and then there's the fight scene with Frank, and then this last moment here where they go to the roof and they found Holly, but then as you realize, of course, and it's been suggested all along, Holly still isn't on their side. She's a collaborator, and she's a spy who's there to disrupt and ultimately kill, and she's what's called a honey trap. Her beauty and her looks and her sex appeal are what enabled her to get close to them, and then she's here to perform the execution at the end. And she says the same thing to him that the guy from the encampment that turned on them says, "You can't win. This is overwhelming odds." And that's true. The left, we're not the Lakers, we're not the Yankees, we're the Clippers and the Mets. We're the underdogs. Historically, the part of the working class that comprises people of actual left-wing inclinations is small. Most workers are basically depoliticized. If anything, they might have right-wing views, about, I don't know, all these cultural issues like women's roles, and they might be racist and so on. And it's really up to this small minority of organizers and activists to do anything about it. And the odds are against us. But as you see here, with the right mix of luck and heroism and sacrifice, and a little quick thinking here at the end, You can really disrupt the system, as Nada is about to do. And look at how he's just so heartbroken, really, about her. Man, those pretty eyes and all that eyeliner. He should have known better. And finally he does, and he's able to shoot her. And in this hokey, almost B-movie way, that little pea shooter gun he has. Is able to, the system's that vulnerable. He should take out one satellite. And again, cable television is private, is going back to neoliberalism. Before the 80s, basically all the television that you had was on the major networks. And a lot of it was pretty thoughtful and intelligent. There were fewer options, but in a way the quality of the programming was better. And it united us more. And then cable really became this thing. And then this is hilarious thing where now, in this final scene, you see people really seeing, the satellite has gone out. You see who these guys really are. And there's a great funny joke about, him making fun of the critics of his movies. And you start to see all these people in and then this last punchline where she's having sex with an alien. They're attracted to us, but we're not attracted to them. And there you see his name finally at the end. Nada. So there you have it, you guys. One last lecture for me. Sort of a DVD commentary, and a bit rambling as usual with these. I really hope you're staying safe and strong out there. I hope you've learned something from this class, and that you remember that one theme, if nothing else. Dare to think for yourself. Don't just blindly obey, and that, as this movie shows, part of thinking for yourself is realizing where you are in the class struggle, in the fight for resources between the rich and the powerful and the poor and the oppressed, and that in the normal run of things, the rich are always winning and the poor are becoming poorer. But in key moments like this, movie seems to document, and maybe our current circumstances in the quarantine crisis situation are making possible. Working people can fight back, and by thinking for themselves and educating each other and uniting and supporting each other, make a different future from the one we seem destined to be living in, where we're in this slow motion, bad science fiction nightmare movie. Okay? So I've enjoyed teaching you. I love this movie. I love these books I've been teaching you, and I hope, if nothing else, you keep reading, keep writing, and keep questioning things and thinking for yourself. Have a wonderful, wonderful break. You don't have to do the final, but if you do, the link is up. You can rewatch this movie multiple times, and I'll put this up on Blackboard by this afternoon. Have a great day, and my grades for you will be up hopefully on Blackboard by the end of next week. Okay, be well and power to the people.